In an extraordinary day for the Republican Party, the GOP's past two presidential nominees, Mitt Romney and John McCain, denounced Donald Trump, saying the current Republican frontrunner is a danger to the nation and the party. Romney spoke in Utah.
Let me put it very plainly. If we Republicans choose Donald Trump as our nominee, the prospects for a safe and prosperous future are greatly diminished. I understand the anger Americans feel today. In the past, our presidents have channeled that anger and forged it into resolve, into endurance and high purpose, and into the will to defeat the enemies of freedom. Our anger was transformed into energy directed for good. Mr. Trump is directing our anger for less than noble purposes. He creates scapegoats of Muslims and Mexican immigrants. He calls for the use of torture. He calls for killing the innocent children and family members of terrorists. He cheers assaults on protesters. He applauds the prospect of twisting the Constitution to limit First Amendment freedom of the press. This is the very brand of anger that has led other nations into the abyss. Here's what I know. Donald Trump is a phony, a fraud. His promises are as worthless as a degree from Trump University.
Hours after Mitt Romney spoke, Donald Trump came under more criticism at a debate in Detroit hosted by Fox News. Florida Senator Marco Rubio also focused on Trump University, Trump's for-profit venture now at the center of a multi-million-dollar fraud claim.
He's trying to do to the American voter what he did to the people that signed up for this course. He's making promises he has no intention of keeping. And it won't just be $36,000 that they lose. It's our country that's at stake here, the future of the United States in the most important election in a generation, and he's trying to con people into giving them their vote, just like he conned these people into giving them their money.
Let me tell you, the real con artist, excuse me. The real con artist is Senator Marco Rubio, who was elected in Florida and who has the worst voting record in the United States Senate. He doesn't go to vote. He's absent. He doesn't go. Now, the people of Florida can't stand him. He couldn't get elected dog catcher.
Texas Senator Ted Cruz, meanwhile, blasted Trump for having donated to Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign in 2008.
I understand the folks who are supporting Donald right now. You're angry at Washington, and he uses angry rhetoric. But for 40 years, Donald has been part of the corruption in Washington that you're angry about. And you're not going to stop the corruption in Washington by supporting someone who has supported liberal Democrats for 4 decades, from Jimmy Carter to John Kerry to Hillary Clinton. You're not going to stop the corruption and the cronyism by supporting someone who has used government power for private gain. Instead, we need a president who stands with the American people.
The Republican debate repeatedly broke down into shouting matches and name-calling. Within the first 10 minutes of the debate, Trump even defended the size of his penis while responding to a recent comment from Marco Rubio about the size of his hands.
I also happen to call him a lightweight, okay, and I have said that, so I would like to take that back. He's really not that much of a lightweight. And as far as, and I have to say this, he hit my hands. Nobody has ever hit my hands. I've never heard of this one. Look at those hands. Are they small hands? And he referred to my hands. If they're small, something else must be small. I guarantee you there's no problem. I guarantee it.
Ohio Governor John Kasich tried to stay out of the fray, but also advocated for the most hawkish foreign policy of the night, calling for a significant number of U.S. ground forces in Syria, Iraq, and Libya.
Fortunately, in Libya, there's only a few cities on the coast because most of Libya is a desert. The fact of the matter is we absolutely have to be, and not just with special forces. I mean, that's not going to work. Come on, you got to go back to the invasion when we pushed Saddam Hussein out of Kuwait. We have to be there on the ground in significant numbers. We do have to include our Muslim Arab friends to work with us on that. And we have to be in the air. And it should be a broad coalition made up of the kinds of people that were involved when we defeated Saddam. Now, you got to be on the ground and in the air, both in Syria and Iraq. And at some point, we will have to deal with Libya.
Despite the growing attacks on Donald Trump from within the Republican establishment, all three of his challengers vowed to support Trump if he wins the nomination.
I'll support the Republican nominee.
Mr. Trump, yes or no?
I'll support Donald if he's the Republican nominee.
Senator Cruz, yes or no, you will support Donald Trump if he's the nominee?
Yes, because I gave my word that I would.
Yes or no, would you support Donald Trump as the Republican nominee?
Yeah, I kind of think that before it's all said and done, I'll be the nominee.
To talk more about the Republican debate, we're joined by two guests. Lester Spence is Associate Professor of Political Science and Africana Studies at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore. His new book is Knocking the Hustle Against the Neoliberal Turn in Black Politics. And joining us from Irvine, California, is Brian Levin, the director of the Center for the Study of Hate and Extremism at California State University in San Bernardino. His recent article in the Huffington Post is "We All Must Draw a Line Against Hate and Violence." Lester Spence, let's begin with you. Your reaction to the debate last night?
It was like pulling teeth watching it. I was born in Detroit, grew up in the Detroit area, and I think it's really interesting that at no point in time during the debate at all did they talk about the policies that are affecting Detroit, the policies that are affecting cities like Flint, policies of emergency financial management that actually are kind of reflected a bipartisan consensus, but were basically created by a Republican legislature and a Republican governor. My mom was a substitute teacher at Spain Elementary. She just retired. Spain Elementary, they had a rodent infestation. They had a gym that was crumbling, and it required Ellen DeGeneres and I think Justin Bieber to donate money to get it straight. And they didn't talk about any of that.
And in your book, you deal a lot with the whole issue of the neoliberal impact on public education in the country. But there's been, certainly in the Republican debates, very, very little discussion of education, except for Trump repeatedly saying we're going to get rid of Common Core, we're going to get rid of Common Core.
And the Department of Education.
And the Department of Education.
That's how he'd save money.
Yeah, and again, if you think about the state of Michigan has some of the laxest regulations in charter schools. And what I think of either a Free Press or a new Detroit News report suggested was that because of that lack of regulation, you had significant levels of corruption and a number of charter schools that were allowed to function long after they should have been closed. We didn't have a discussion of any of that.
Can we get your response, Brian Levin, to what you watched last night in Detroit, the Republican debate, the 11th, I think it was, now down to the 4 candidates vying to be the Republican presidential candidate nominee?
What I found disturbing was that with all the rhetoric coming from Republicans of goodwill, if you listen to, for instance, George W. Bush when he visited a mosque after 9/11, John McCain when he was on the campaign trail, and Arabic-phobic comments were made. Even Speaker of the House tried to say, look, we have to put a line in the sand with regard to white nationalists, Klansmen, neo-Nazis. It was a footnote. It started and said, would you disavow? And what I think needed to be done was something by all the candidates, not to retreat from their positions. We're a nonpartisan center, but to say there is a line that we draw, and that line is against white supremacists, white nationalists, and neo-Nazis, because I have not seen in the decades that I've been researching this a successful mainstream candidate having the endorsement of a virtual who's who of Klansmen, white nationalists, and others. We're talking about not just people like David Duke, but folks from the Loyal White Knights, InfoStormer, Daily Stormer, Stormfront. It is a tidal wave of support, and it is because there are not policy messages that appeal to the white supremacists and white nationalists, but rather the xenophobic and racist tones where Mexicans are labeled as criminals and Muslims are broad brushed to an extent that they not only should be excluded from coming into the country, but this not even dog whistle that there should be some socio-political exclusion of Muslims. This is a terrible time for the party of Lincoln.
We're going to break, come back, and I'm going to ask you about your attendance at a Klan rally and what the members had to say about Donald Trump. We're talking to Brian Levin, director of the Center for the Study of Hate and Extremism at California State University in San Bernardino, and Lester Spence. He has a new book out. It's called Knocking the Hustle. Stay with us.